Good evening, and welcome to another episode of the DMV Daily Radio Show. I'm your host, Hassan Giordano. It seems like it's been so long since I've been behind this microphone. Hold on, we were off Monday. Tuesday, I did it on scene. Wasn't here yesterday. Friday, y'all held it. That was a hell of a program. If y'all missed Friday's program, you better go back. Wait till this show's over with, of course. Go back to that and listen to that show. That was one of the best produced shows we've had in some time, talking about the individual who was charged and released on bail, with his attorney was on there, Councilman Cohen. Oh, man, that was a hell of a program. Anyway, today we have another hot program in store for you. We will be joined by filmmaker and producer Richard Yeagley about his recently released podcast entitled Town of the Big House, distributed by NPR, affiliated, the NPR affiliate WYPR, in which he reveals details about Kahan Dhillon, a Virginia developer who has come to Baltimore with a $10 billion redevelopment plan that has some questioning if he's serious or simply a con man, or others believing that he's an FBI informant. We've had him on the show before. You know that. You've heard him here. You watched him here, right here on the program. Today, we're going to talk to Richard Yeagley about that podcast. If you haven't heard it, after the show, you definitely want to go listen to it for your own consumption. It's only 5 episodes, so it's not very long. Each episode's roughly 20, 30 minutes, so it's not a very long, drawn-out podcast. You'll be able to get it done in an hour and a half tops, all 5 episodes, but it's something you're definitely going to want to check out. But before we get into that program, as always, I have to let you know that this program is brought to you by our fine sponsors, such as that stellar legal team known as the Bates & Garcia Law Firm, specializing in criminal defense, real estate, and bodily injury cases. Bates & Garcia is Maryland's legal dream team, so make sure that you contact them today for your free consultation. 410-814-4600 is the number. Tell them DMV Daily referred you, and they will give you that homeboy discount. 410-814-4600 is the number. Matter of fact, they so fine at doing their job. We just got done recording Ivan's podcast, Law and Disorder, with his partner, Corey. They stepped into the next room to handle a conference call with a federal judge all at the same time and about to come back onto the program. That's how you got to do these. You got to multitask, get that bag. So I ain't mad at him. Ivan's here with me. He'll be back in a couple of minutes while he takes care of his business. This show is also brought to you by those savvy political strategists at Politicom Strategic Solutions, who have mastered the art of political communications and successfully gotten people elected since the 1970s. If you're thinking about running for office in 2020, you want to raise money like Mr. Westry did, Philip Westry, that we had on the program last week, who is a client of Politicom's, who's raised more money than any contender in the city of Baltimore, any first-time challenger this past reporting cycle, then you definitely want to reach out to Politicom today. Get your campaign plan set up, campaign website, user-friendly social media integration, the whole 9. They can be reached at 240-242-7505 or on the web at politicomsolutions.com. Again, 240-242-7505 is the number. And also, DMV Daily Media is always looking to produce live stream radio shows or podcasts like the DMV Daily Radio Show, or like the recently produced Annapolis Report podcast, or the upcoming legal podcast I just talked about, Law and Disorder with Ivan Bates. We just got finished wrapping up recording the season premiere of Law and Disorder earlier today. So make sure you stay tuned for that podcast. It will be released every other Tuesday on DMVDaily.news. If you want to host your own live stream radio show like this one, you want us to produce your podcast, it's simple. Just give us a call. 443-294-3900 is the number, or just email us, info@dmvdaily.news. Go to the website. You can fill out the forms there as well. Get your own podcast, get your own radio show, or become a writer, a citizen journalist for DMVDaily.news. We got 2 new articles up, op-eds up recently in the past week. You want to go check them out. The latest one is in reference to the Senate president and the position of Senate president in looking to move that forward in the selection process, and who can possibly take the place of Senate President Thomas Mike Miller, who's the current Senate President. So you want to look at that. Richard Elliott, good friend of the programs, wrote that with Bobby Moore. So you definitely want to go look at that. But you can also become a citizen journalist at DMVDaily.news as well. I'm having problems with this computer. I think my computer just froze. So y'all gonna have to bear with me. I don't even know what I'm gonna say now. But anyway, go there. We can get you set up, ready to go. Matter of fact, just sent out the press release today, starting tomorrow and stretching through February 28th. We have our Black History Month discount going on for both, not only just the podcasts and the shows, but as well as advertisement. We have a lot of small businesses who want to advertise. We have packages for advertisements, whether you want banners on the website, whether you want 30-second commercials here on the radio stream, 24 hours, 7 days a week, like you hear the Bates and Garcia professionally produced commercial. You want a voiceover commercial. Or if you want to run a commercial on any of the podcasts, we'll be able to, or if you want all of them in one package, we can make that happen as well. So make sure you reach out. The number is 443-294-3900. Now, as always, you can definitely be a part of the program by simply giving us a call. Going on to our Facebook page like Larry Stafford, Mike Ball, Jason. Man, Mark, if you don't come on with this damn Jason McLaurin, go back to Mark. They let you back. They didn't kick you off forever. You're back on. You keep getting me mixed up with this Jason. Lisa Mills, Jackie Addison, Tamara, Stinnett. Hey, Miss Stinnett. Tamara. Oh, it was Tammy. You confuse me. See, y'all confused me today. Y'all got my computers down. Mike Ball grabbed some popcorn. He didn't give me none.
And these aliases.
Yeah. People get on Facebook and I don't know who they are anymore. But anyway, make sure you give us a shout out there. If you got questions, if you got comments for the guests, make sure you put it there. Of course, as always, we will look at that and make that a part of the program as well. You can give us a call, 410-81. What is the number? I told you my computer that I can't do nothing without
410-819-2370, family. And you can text or call in your questions. 819-2370.
So I need some help right now. My computer completely froze. It won't shut down. Even when I push the power button, it don't go off. In the Control-Alt-Delete, that don't even work.
Hold down the power button for a certain period of time. That should reboot it.
My computer's never done this. And I got a Microsoft Surface. That's the best in the business, baby. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There it is. Bobby Moore is on there. That's one of our citizen journalists. Like I said, him and Richard Elliott have a great op-ed that you want to go look at on DMVDaily.news right now. We have another one that was just posted earlier in the week that you definitely want to go look at as well. My guy, Hamza Khan, who writes regularly for us as well, who wants to start writing regularly for us. And you can do the same. Just go to the website, DMVDaily.news, make that happen today. Now, as we talked about, Richard Yeagley will be on the program today. We've had a little scheduling issue in terms of, instead of being in studio, he will call in. He will call in at 5:30. He had something else he had to do down in the Fells Point area. There was no way he could have got up here in time, but he wanted to be with the family. He wanted to be a part of the program. We want to talk about this podcast that has everybody in the town talking right now. So make sure that you stay tuned in. We're going to have him on, but we can still take calls. So you can still call in to the number if you have questions or if you have comments about the podcast or about the subject of the podcast. But I want to say this, and I know I wrote this down, but I remember this. We ain't getting into no Kill Kahan program. That's not what this is about. All right? We ain't getting into all that. So if you got a personal beef with the man or something like that, We're not getting into that. We're not getting into criticizing people, just to criticize them. This program is always about to inform, to educate, and to get to the bottom of issues. That's what we strive to be. It's not about, beating up on people. I know this podcast was done in such a way that I don't think it's shining a great light on the gentleman, but nonetheless, I don't think that the producer of this program went out of his way to criticize him as well, right? We're not going to do that here on the program as well, but we do want to get to the bottom of it. We want to see who Mr. Dhillon is and if his project and ideas deserve our attention. Bottom line, it's been plenty of talk about this gentleman for over the years, about this TBR project, otherwise known as the Baltimore Renaissance Project, $10 billion project that he's been selling to citizens across the city and elected officials alike. We want to get to the bottom of it. Is it worthwhile? Is the guy a con man? Is it even worth having a conversation beyond tonight? That's what we need to get to the bottom of, because at the end of the day, we're dealing with way too many issues in the city of Baltimore. We really need to move our city forward. And the last thing we need to do is continuously be distracted by stuff like this, right? And by people like this, if it turns out that he is not who he says he is. Now, I know I've done my investigation, as our producer, Jason Rodriguez, has done. And we've uncovered some stuff that we definitely want to discuss tonight with Mr. Yeagley that wasn't even put in the podcast, that we want to be able to bring up. And again, Mr. Kahan, I'm sure you're listening. You can call in as well. We definitely will bring you up. And, let's just get to the bottom of this entire ordeal and move forward. Bottom line, end of discussion. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Again, join the conversation, 410-819-2370 is the number. You can text in if you don't feel like calling in, or just go to the Facebook page, hey, Lisa, and make that happen. Now,
no pitchforks and torches allowed tonight.
Nah, we ain't doing none of that. And I'm be honest with you. So some have speculated that, Kahan maybe is an FBI informant, while others believe he's come. I've met him. We've had several conversations. I personally like the guy. Me and a few members of his team have went out to eat at different times. And they've, told me about the project and plan and all that stuff. That really didn't convince me, but I just liked him personally. I think him and a few of the members of the team were just really personable people. We enjoyed lunch. That was basically it. There was nothing, but it's like Baltimore sometimes has this crab in a barrel treatment, right? That really just gets to the heart, and it really sickens me at times. Number one, sometimes we do have the mentality and to be suspect. I know I do all the time. If you ain't from Baltimore, especially from some people, if you can't name the high school you went to, you ain't really from Baltimore, right? So we have this kind of suspicious nature from anybody who ain't born and bred in Baltimore. I don't have a problem with that one. My problem is for those who are, or those who are trying to make a difference in this city, this crab in a barrel mentality of, if I'm not a part of it, then I'm going to try to tear you down. I'm not going to try to help you in any which means unless I get something out of it personally. And I'm going to continuously criticize you or talk about you. And it's like you almost have to make it outside of Baltimore and be successful for people from Baltimore to accept you as being successful. And I never understood that. I really didn't. I don't get that whole mentality at all. And so sometimes it's probably better not to be from Baltimore, to be quite honest, and come here, because you seem to get a better chance, a more, because I hear people who've never met Kahan or met him one or two times acting like he's the savior of Baltimore. When you don't know this guy from Adam, that's a problem. But yet you meet me, and you know me from high school, but you swear to God I'm the worst thing since, you know what I mean? Because that's just sometimes how some of us think and act. And that's a very huge problem in Baltimore. I don't know if it's in other cities. I'm not from other cities, so I ain't going to talk about other cities. I'm talking about Baltimore right now. And we got way too many issues, way too many things on our plate to be worried about going back and forth on somebody that honestly is irrelevant in the bigger schemes of things. I'm not saying that he's irrelevant as a human being. I think everybody has relevancy in some point of their life. But we keep talking about this. And honestly, I'm sick of talking about it. That's the reason why we scheduled this program. Because I didn't even really want to listen to the podcast. Because I don't really care about who he is and all that other stuff. It doesn't affect my everyday life or my family or my community. And at the end of the day, I have yet to see this plan come to fruition. So until I see the fruits of his labor, then it don't mean a damn thing to me, right?
I think in some ways it does affect us because some folks are looking for that great hope, are looking for that change in Baltimore, and he's selling, that elixir, that magical elixir that everybody is looking for,
But I don't see how. You got 70 sites. He wants to redevelop this 10 billion. Okay, if you do that, how's that benefiting me? Right? Yeah, maybe in time it can benefit my community.
Yeah,
right?
Better Baltimore.
But it seems like it's benefiting you because you want millions of dollars up front, which doesn't happen traditionally in development deals. And I don't see, it's always Kahan. It's never about the team. It's never about anything but Kahan. So that turned me off immediately. Like, but again, cool guy. I got a problem hanging out with him. But you would never sell me on being a leader, And this whole mayoral thing, that was a joke. Matter of fact, we're going to get into the Value My Vote. I can't wait to the Value My Vote podcast. I talked to a reporter from the Baltimore Sun the other day, and we kicked the bobo about the mayoral possibilities. So now the seating's coming in. People are starting to talk about possibilities of will Sheila Dixon run again? Kwaizi's been mentioned recently about people trying to get him back to run. Will Councilman Scott run for that, or council president? Will Z. Cohen run? The whole back and forth. And so I can't wait to get into that podcast. We're going to have people from all walks of life on that podcast talking from the Baltimore Sun, from the Baltimore Brew, from other, news outlets who will pontificate on the politics of 2020. And that's just Baltimore. We ain't even got into the presidential stuff yet or the congressional stuff. And what happens if Elijah Cummings doesn't run? Will his wife run? Will Marilyn Mosby run? Will Catherine Pugh forego the mayoral and decide to run for Elijah's seat, which she really wanted the whole time before she ever became mayor? So will that be a possibility? I mean, it's so many possibilities. That's why I love politics so much. It's just endless possibilities sometimes with some of that stuff. So yes, we're definitely going to get into all that. But tonight, we're getting into the politics of development, redevelopment, and this guy by the name of Kahan Dhillon, who was the centerpiece of this podcast known as The Town of the Big House. The producer of that program, who has made no bones about it, he's not, as he says, a reporter, but a filmmaker and a producer. And this was basically a nonfiction narrative type of podcast, as he followed Kahan around for some time and kind of got into some of the stuff. Clearly, it wasn't investigative journalism at all. But it made for an interesting conversation. So that's the conversation we're going to have tonight. He will be back. I mean, he will be calling in the next 5 or 6 minutes. But I want to hear from y'all right now while we wait for him to call in, set the kind of the groundwork. Co-host Ivan is here with me. So for those, I know you listen to the podcast. Oh, yeah, I did. You the one said it to me.
Turn down a little.
So, yeah, he's an old man.
I'm an old man.
He can't take the feedback from the.
I can't. I got a little kid, so she's screaming in my ear 24/7.
So
what did I think?
Yeah,
off the hook. Just in the sense that, one, I don't understand how Kahan Dhillon could have given a reporter the ability just to record him whenever he wanted to. I mean, that to me was very odd. And the way in which he conducted his business to me was odd, because you feel if you're going to give a reporter the opportunity to just record you anytime he wants to, then you're going to at least have your stuff together to make you look good.
Yeah.
And that's the part that blows me away.
Oh, you only can come see me on Fridays.
Yeah, you can only come see me on Fridays. It just, I was amazed by the number of people that he was consistently having the ability to talk to. And what eventually you kind of wonder, like, why? What do you want? So it almost appears that he had gotten what he wanted. He was part of the crowd. He was talking to the movers and shakers. And then little by little, people started to find out who he was. And then to hear the brother Stevie B, break him down and challenge him. And then Kahan just kept stating, he almost sounded like Trump, fake news, fake news, fake news. This is fake. You're fake. You're fake. And then to understand, I hope Mr. Dhillon understands that the hurt he caused, a number of people believed in him. When you sit down and look at Steve Copeland, and you could hear that brother, the hurt, because he trusted. I feel bad for the citizens because it seems to me that Mr. Dhillon peddled in hope. He gave people in a destitute, in a position that were hurting, he gave them hope, and he wasn't, from what I can hear, what it looks, the podcast showed to me, he wasn't truthful. And that hurt. And so when you constantly have that, people are looking for hope, people looking for someone to breathe positive light into the city, and it's constantly not happening. Eventually they just want to give up. And I hope the people believed in Mr. Dhillon don't. But when we had Mr. Dhillon on our show, that's when I watched him closely to make my call. And that's when I decided that there were things about him I just didn't believe in.
Well, that's what I don't get. So here's my thing, right? If you are so-called the youngest intern in the history of Congress at 15 years old, right? Executive or whatever you call it, chief of staff for a congressman at 17, you would think, number one, there would either be some kind of history on that, a news reporter or somebody would have picked that up. As much as you talk about it, you should have had that, I'm sure, framed or, you should have some proof of that, right? Especially since you're the one who continues to bring it up. Nobody else brings this up but you. So you would think that you would have some proof of that to say, here's an article that, says that this is, who I was or what I've done, or just a picture maybe of you in Congress at 15, right? Yeah. Nothing. And that's what I just don't. And here's my biggest thing. We're going to get in a conversation about his father later on, but he talks about in his podcast that his father on his deathbed told him about the 100%, 0% trust, right? That you either got 100% or 0%. He says that he fell down the steps, he broke his neck, and he was in the hospital. And on his dying breath, this is what he told him. But every media report that I've ever found from across the world, because his father was a big player, reported that his father passed away in his house due to illness. Even his family member said that they were by his side in his house when he died, that he'd been sick for so long. There's no reports of him ever going to the hospital, falling down, breaking his neck, and all this other stuff.
Yeah, it's like
it's ridiculous.
So many lies, he couldn't keep up with them. And that was interesting. But then you have the aspect of what was he doing having these one-on-one meetings with some of the people in political office? I was blown away by that. Like, why are you having them? And a couple of people I want to ask that too. But was he a possible federal informant? That's something that we have to really ask ourselves. And to me, there are a lot of questions that the podcast answered, but there's still a lot of questions that have yet to be answered. And I guess that's what made the podcast interesting listening. And,
but I think they could have went. I wish they would have did a serial type of investigative journal. Like, there's some stuff that Jason had pointed out to me that he did research on that you could quickly find within a matter of minutes by doing some real research, right? That I think would have been very well reflected in this. And I'm not saying that Mr. Yeagley actually may do this maybe further afterward. It sounded like he kind of wrapped it up at the last one to me. But I think if you dig in a little bit deeper, he may find some stuff that really kind of shines the light on how Kahan even got to this point, right? From his upbringing to how he got to Baltimore. And is he on the line?
You got Brother Thomas waiting, and then you got him on the line as well.
Okay, well.
Go to Brother Thomas first to get him.
Yeah, real quick. And then we got Brother Thomas.
Yeah, man.
Hey, now.
How you guys doing today?
Oh, all right. How you doing?
Good, Brother Ivan. How are you, man?
I'm good, my brother.
Could Kahan possibly be Al Sharpton's twin brother, CI informant 00 number 8? Okay? Gotta answer that question. Just want to throw that out there, since he seems to have all the answers. And his father was supposed to have fell down the steps, whatever, and break his neck. Is that why he's wearing that brace around his neck? Because he fell down somebody's steps? And also, if he's supposed to be the youngest intern or whatever he was in Congress in history, right? Mm-hmm. I got to ask this one question, guys. But first of all, let me clarify something. The views and opinion I'm about to give is that of Thomas, not the DMVDaily Show, not Attorney Ivan Bates, Kahan Dhillon, or Jason, or this station, or this management. Ivan, did I clarify that?
Yep, good job.
Now, let me say what I'm getting ready to say now. If he was the youngest person in history to be in the Congress as working for somebody, whose butt buddy was he? Huh?
Yeah, that's what I asked. What Congress member?
Yeah.
In the black community,
what senator?
In the black community, in the black community, that's what we call that. He's talking about his butt buddy.
Well, that's a good question, too.
Yeah.
He was the chief of staff. For congressman. He said at 17 he was the chief of staff for a congressman, but he never said who.
Right.
Yeah.
Which would have been the easy fix, because we could have just easily then went back to that congressperson, and there would have been record of that.
Unless he chooses a dead one.
Well, he was good at giving. No, there's still a record of that. There's still a record of that. You know, I remember.
If you're a staffer,
when I was in coming out of college, I graduated from college. I'm not going to tell you the year, but let's just say it was way back in the day. I worked for the congressman out of Brooklyn, Major Owens. I was his intern years and years and years ago. Okay. And so you can easily go back and look and see, and they'll tell you who the interns were and that. So if they could tell you who the interns were back in the 90s, then you know they can sit down and tell you who the chief of staff was for this congressman. But, you know, he told just enough lies to get you interested, and then you kind of like, whoa. And, you know, and he was a good liar. But all lies come to an end.
I gotta say this, guys. He's also pretty good at buying chicken boxes and half for some of these folks, too. Okay?
Yeah.
He'll buy a 2-piece chicken box, have a whole bunch of chicken, whole bunch of half and half, a whole bunch of French fries and stuff with salt, pepper, ketchup on it, and then all of a sudden call himself doing something good for the community. You know?
Yeah.
I got to question this guy. Because he's doing so great in Virginia, okay? Arlington, Virginia, or wherever's that. Arlington or Alexandria, Virginia. How come the folks down there don't know nothing about him?
Yeah.
All right, we got to go about the time. I got to break.
You can't show me no development in Alexandria, Virginia that's even affiliated with him.
Right. Okay.
Hey guys, thanks for taking my call. Good sir.
Thank you.
Well, we have somebody that may be able to answer some of these questions.
Oh, you're going to answer all of them. Mr. Yeagley, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for calling in and joining the DMV Daily Show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.
So, you know, as you probably are, we're getting into this. We've preempted you coming on, kind of talking about what we heard on the podcast. Great due diligence in putting that together. The first question I want to have is what prompted you to begin to follow Kahan Dhillon and to begin to investigate and put this podcast together in the first place?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's pretty explicit in the podcast itself. In the first episode, it states that I ultimately got a tip about this guy. I had strangely actually seen him, and he's very conspicuous in the city of Baltimore, and I've seen him doing his pitch. It was probably in January of 2017, and then in April, the tip came to me saying, hey, there's this mysterious character, very fascinating. There's also this rumor that's circulating. So I quickly just did a Google search, hardly found anything on him. So the claims he was making kind of pushed up against the fact that there was very little online. He had very little digital footprint. Made me intrigued by him. And so kind of just as a natural storyteller, I was just intrigued by just the mystery behind the character of Kahan Dhillon.
Mm-hmm. So looking at, and listening to the podcast, most of the research seemed to have came with you kind of following him and his entourage, team, army, whatever he wants to call them, along the way. Did you do any other kind of investigative, like, I'm going to really, or was that like, there's really nothing to investigate with this guy? Because, did you go to Virginia or talk to anybody who even knows this guy, or D.C. in Congress that may have had any recollection that he ever worked in Congress or was an intern in Congress?
Oh, yeah. I mean, several of those things are actually in the podcast. I guess you just missed them. The fact of, the internship claim is he's an unpaid intern. There's no records of unpaid interns. You actually got to get a hold of the senator or congressman that you work for in order for them to verify. Was not able to get in contact with his particular congressman that he was saying he was working for.
Who? I'm sorry to interrupt.
There'd be no way to verify unless you got that on record. But the other thing is the claim is that he's the youngest. You would never be able to fact check all of those things. As far as just taking a step back, I am a documentary filmmaker. Most of the documentaries that I do are verite, so it's very much observational. It's embedding yourself. It's embedded journalism. It's not fact-checking journalism. Right. So the first 3 episodes or so is strictly me embedding myself into this guy's world to kind of do a character study, because ultimately that's how I wanted to present it, as a character study, not necessarily as an expose. Of course, there's certain elements of that at play in the story, and there are certain things that are unanswered and, quite frankly, need to be questioned to a large degree and potentially answered. Third point I'd make is, a lot of the stuff about him is, one, very hard to prove or disprove, and he is very protective of the people in his world. Now, back to your point about Virginia, in the story, I kind of started working with, a very seasoned investigative journalist and a fellow named Michael Amp, and he got to the point in the story, he's like, usually as a journalist, you're rubbing your hands together thinking you'll get to the bottom of this. And he's just like, this guy is just a black box in so many ways. We did in Virginia, most of the people we reached out to were afraid to talk to us, just like the people in Baltimore who got duped by him ultimately were very much afraid to talk to him until things hit the fan entirely, which is like right around this moment. I'm getting a lot of calls from people who are willing to talk now but weren't before. So in Virginia, I do think he has like a proclivity to kind of try to present himself in a particular light as like, the richest man in the room. Whether or not that's, to execute some ulterior motive remains to be seen, but he definitely wants to present himself as the most powerful guy in a room, and he wants to control a room. And a lot of times it seems like he's doing that in a way that's penetrating certain nonprofits, and I guess he perceives that as prestige. So we did, and this is also in the podcast, we did have a bit where, a person who was off the record, did not want to be on the record, I guess for fear of retribution, talked about how, he basically, it was the Chamber of Commerce in Fairfax County, how he basically set them back years and years by making it very political and like waging war on a lot of the people on the board. So yeah, mixed with like some of the things, some of the things are very obvious. Like when he first came to Baltimore, he was loosely claiming he was a developer of Tyson's Corner, the big redevelopment project there. That's the type of thing that's just easy to figure out that all he was on was the Citizens Task Force, which is great. I guess if you're a citizen and you want to be on the task force, but to come to Baltimore City and to claim that you're a guy who's going to be a master planner or a developer, as he was claiming earlier on, of a $10 billion citywide redevelopment plan, that's just absurd and quite frankly just like a disconnect with like what he actually thinks he can do. So, as far as like money that's also in the story too. Not money, but his development. All we could find is up to about 2014, he appeared to be a house flipper, which is great. Whatever, you're doing what you're doing. That doesn't necessarily translate to big commercial, residential, $10 billion level of development, which is absurdly high amount. That's all we found. I actually did work with a private investigator who dug up all of that stuff. So yeah, there was a gap in development, and clearly if you look at his website, there doesn't seem to be any developments listed. So it doesn't seem like he does have any developments, at least in the past few years.
Right. And I want to kind of clarify, because I should have said this up front. So I did hear, and I understand what you're saying. Well, if you missed it, I heard. I'm just trying to set up the questions for those who are listening and watching who haven't heard it, so that way they get a better understanding of what we heard during the podcast. So when they go back, I want them to start listening for these things. Now, one of the listeners asked you, and this is a funny question too. So I don't know, have you ever been in contact when trying to contact Mr. Dhillon? He has a personal assistant named Brittany.
Yes.
Have you ever in your life met Brittany? Is
No.
she real?
Most likely not.
Okay. That was the biggest I mean,
question.
that was a huge, it still is a huge mystery till now, that this Brittany person who's supposed to be his personal assistant always reaches out to people. He's always late to meetings, and it's Brittany who calls and says he's stuck in traffic every time. But nobody ever gets to meet Brittany. So I was wondering if you ever came across her.
Not to labor on that point too much. I didn't include that in the story because it's one of those things. Be very hard to prove, but I'm pretty certain she doesn't exist. Mostly because the writing style is exactly the same emails that she sends and he sends. Never seen her, never talked to her. There's no voice message. There's nothing online. It's fairly obvious to me.
Let me ask you a question. This is Ivan Bates. Two questions, actually. One, what do you think he really wanted from Baltimore? And number two, do you believe he's an FBI informant?
So I'll unpack the first question. Who really knows? I cannot get inside his head. I kind of just think he has this megalomaniacal streak, and I think it's just like a desire for power, even if there's nothing substantive behind it. I think that's just like the psychological aspect behind everything. That's just me speculating. I do think if the FBI informant theory is true, and that's just a theory that's not provable, that could have been his entrance, his portal to Baltimore. He's clearly not an informant anymore. If he was working some case, he did his time, kind of did what he needed to do, and then probably because he met so many people and had so many private meetings, he probably tried to leverage those opportunities. That's me theorizing. So I think if the FBI informant thing is true, which I think that there's a lot of coincidental evidence that say it could be, that was his way into Baltimore. And then from there, he probably just tried to leverage those connections that he made or that he thought he was making into doing whatever it is he really wants to do. And I quite haven't figured that out. People, chime in on Facebook and use the word con man, and it's like, yeah, it does feel that way, but it's weird because he's not really asking for money from anyone, or he's not extracting money seemingly from anyone. Instead, he's promising money, and he's making promises that are just empty. So it's almost like he's like playing a character of like this like king who can provide like resources to this struggling city that he perceives needs his help, and he just wants that satisfaction of being desired and wanted. It's like that's my personal theory.
Richard, I actually equated, this is the producer, Jason Rodriguez, by the way. I actually equated it to the old days when the guy would come around with the magical elixirs on a cart, and sell you, that this was the cure-all for everything. That basically he's just a sideshow.
Mm-hmm. And you alluded to that in the podcast in terms of, you spoke to several girlfriends who made this claim that he has like a savior complex, right?
Yeah.
That he tries to like want to come in and save people.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think it's pretty clear the rhetoric he uses, talking about the $10 billion Baltimore Renaissance plan, and it's even like the acolytes, the followers that are like, well, at least were all about him and following him, thinking he was providing all the solutions to Baltimore's woes. It's unfortunate the girlfriends did not go on the record because they had great things to say, but I think that's pretty obvious that he has this savior complex where he thinks he can come in and save this disenfranchised community. And I don't know if that's like a psychological thing going on with him for why he thinks that, because it is quite, based on all the evidence and based on the history that I see, it does seem a little bit delusional. But he, I think it could also just be kind of a branding effort for him. I don't think it's that strategic and that thought out. I think it's just something that is just like internal and like he has to do.
Are these girlfriends from Baltimore?
What's that?
Are the girlfriends that you spoke to, are they from Baltimore or Virginia?
Well, without giving away too much, neither of them live in the city now. No, one of them lives out of state, and one of them lives in surrounding county. But only one was originally from the Baltimore area.
Damn, he got a Baltimore chick fell for that crap.
Richard, Ivan had a question as to the representative, who the representative was. Yeah, who the representative that Kahan was supposed to have worked for?
Oh yes,
I'm drawing a blank on the name right now.
Okay. On the member
sorry,
of who's the congressman or congressperson that he worked for. Let me ask you.
Yes,
at the end of the
drawing a blank on the
day.
name. I can get it to you. I could dig into some of my research and find it for you. But I'm drawing a blank on the name.
Yeah,
right
I'll be very curious because he's probably going to say early 2000, late 90s. You know, I have a number of contacts back in Capitol Hill back then. I'd be very curious to see, you know, who I would know if they'd ever come across him. One of the questions, normally to me, when you're getting ready to put together a podcast or a documentary, you set out to show, to prove, to do something. Were you able to, one, what was your goal in doing this? And were you able to complete your goal when you sit down and look at the 5-part podcast that you put together?
So I would kind of disagree with the premise in that I don't necessarily produce any type of stories and try to wrap a bow at the end and make it very clear as to what the outcomes are. That's just not the level of storytelling that I'm mostly interested in. The more confused, I think the world is very gray. I don't think it's black and white. So, that's just kind of my worldview and my philosophical outtake. But with that being said, with Kahan, I actually approached it knowing that I don't know that I'm ever going to find out all of the answers to all of the questions that I want that are floating around in my head. And to a large degree, I actually found from a storytelling standpoint, not to compare this podcast to Serial, but Serial plays up that very much. You never learn the outcome of the murder trial. And so it almost is a very effective means of storytelling where you kind of pick your camp and you kind of have to make your own decision on your own part. So I kind of went into it feeling like it was going to be that type of story. And it ultimately is. Who is Kahan? I mean, I think at this point, most people know he's not like a legitimate developer in the way he's claiming, but is he an FBI informant? What's the con? What is he trying to do? Everything seems insincere and there seems to be a lot of fallacious and mendacity going on. So but to what degree and why? So, that was kind of the model of storytelling that I thought I was going to go into. And that's kind of the way it's set up now. I would have loved to had, I went up with a story like this. So there's present tense documentaries and there's past tense. Most documentaries are past tense where you tell it after the fact. And that's a very much easier form of journalism and documentary film or documentaries where you already know the outcome and you can kind of just sequence things and just make sure you get your interviews and your footage that you need to kind of support a thesis that you already have. This is embedded journalism where you don't know where the story is going. And ultimately I embedded myself in the Kahan's world and then followed as much as I could from afar after I kind of had a separation from him. So you don't really know the outcome. And, I think there could be more to the story, which I'd be interested in covering. But, if it exists as a piece like this, I think it at least in its own little tiny way has, it's a decent enough story that kind of summarizes a small part of what it challenges Baltimore. And it's just a fascinating kind of character look at a particularly interesting character.
So is it done? Is the 5 episodes, is that it? Or are there more episodes to come?
I have not produced anything more, but I've been contacted by several people who have more to say, and there is definitely narrative threads that have continued. Obviously, I think you guys have discussed it with St. Francis Neighborhood Center and kind of what's gone on there.
Mr. Jarrell Bratcher.
Yes, and with Jarrell.
He's watching right now.
Yeah, there's potential, but, I will say I have basically bootstrapped this whole story myself, so a lot of this comes down to resources and time.
Right. Yeah.
This is a very labor-intensive process, so, half the time it is I got to go do my freelance gig and make money instead of, you know, I prefer to work in this format and prefer to dig deeper at every level as possible. But, you know, it just comes down to the resources being available at this point.
Here's a question from Leslie Carter. Has Kahan responded to this podcast?
Yeah, not directly to me, but I mean, I've been forwarded a lot of threads from Facebook posts that he's commented on.
I mean, he has your phone number, right? I mean, you know him. You
I
interacted
reached out
with
to him before the story came out, like the month when I was editing and actually writing the story, after I had done all the interviews and done all the actualities and captured all the material. I reached out to him to try to get like a follow-up interview saying like, hey, the story's going to come out. He never responded to my request. I actually did reach out to him last week as well on Facebook, and I have his number too, just saying like, hey, this came out. Do you want to comment? Do you want a follow-up interview? And he hasn't responded. So I've done my due diligence in reaching out to him. I've reached out to a few of his followers and quote-unquote team members, and, to no avail.
Were you able to find out if he had ever developed any projects? Any?
Develop depends how you define that. I mean, everything that I've looked at looks like he buys a house and then he sells it for more, which is essentially a flip.
Anything outside of flipping
there were
houses?
About 13 to 14 properties that he had done that between like 2010 to 2014. That's all I could find.
Were you able to find out if he was able to do anything involving $1 million or more in terms of projects? I mean, he's at $10 billion. So, I mean, did he do anything at the $1 million level?
Not that I can tell, no.
Okay.
Well, you might want to.
It's so absurd. I mean, why did he have his day in the light in Baltimore City, and why did it last so long? I mean, there are plenty of people who were skeptical right off the bat, just because, I mean, if you had done $1 million project, even if you've done a $10 million project, or you would promote that on a website, and it's pretty clear that there wasn't anything that existed
at all
with that kind of presentation. So it's pretty obvious. And then when you would ask him, he would definitely deflect and would never answer, and he did that all the time with people. So the bigger question is why did people want to believe so desperately in someone who clearly didn't have the credentials, experience, or resources to pull what is essentially just this? So it's so pie in the sky, like $10 billion. If he proposed a $1 billion project, that would still be there would be red flags and it would be laughable. But $10 billion is just, it's so large of a number. It's almost laughable that it actually got this much of a track.
Especially if you haven't even done $1 million project. You got to walk before you run. He's like world champion, Olympic level sprinting. We ain't even seen him walk. So, yeah.
Exactly. I always said it's like, if it's like a film producer or a filmmaker trying to make the next $200 million Spider-Man movie, and they haven't even made a $50,000 movie with their friends. It's just it's absurd. It's delusional, quite frankly.
Well, you may want to go after the show, go on our Facebook feed, Jarrell Bratcher, and contact him and others. They have already said, after watching and still listening to the show, that they want to put up a GoFundMe so they can raise some money for you to keep going with this project and keep doing more episodes in regards to this. But I do want to get into something that was a little disturbing to me, only because of my affiliation with one of the young ladies. Now, I heard during the podcast that you did kind of contact Jack Young's office extensively, and Lester Davis kind of was a buffer in that. But it seemed like in episode 2, it was made to seem as if former Mayor Sheila Dixon was like Kahan's go-to insider information on politicians. Did you ever reach out and talk to Sheila Dixon in regards to getting any clarity as to whether she actually had any close relationship with Mr. Dhillon?
I did. I reached out to her twice and talked to her on the phone twice. So the first time I talked to her, she denied ever knowing who he was, which is a common response that I got. People who seemingly got duped by him and believed in it wanted to completely be like, oh, I didn't know that guy. I'm like, I have video and tapes of you meeting with him. And the audio that I was able to listen to directly clarifies that there's no way that they didn't have a relationship prior to then. So they had to, at the very least, have met one other time. So that would have been 2 times. So she just denied. The first time I talked to her, the second time I kind of displayed what I was gonna air, and then she kind of was like, "Yeah, well, I was part of his team, and this is the thing he normally did when he befriended someone and someone believed in what he was doing. He would assign them some title, director of whatever, and then he said he never did anything with it. But he was definitely cordial with her. To what degree, I don't know, but they definitely. I mean, I don't have the rights to necessarily disclose what they were talking about, but they were definitely gossiping about political figures in the city and sharing information about, rumors that they had heard. So they definitely felt pretty buddy based on what I heard.
Has in one of our people just asked this question as well, and it's kind of a great follow-up. Has any other elected official, since you released this podcast, has any elected officials reached out to you about their possible mentions or contacts with Kahan or anything from Baltimore?
No, and I don't expect to hear from anyone either, just because I think if someone were friendly with them, I think that would be a stain on their reputation, and so they probably will not reach out to me.
I mean, why would some of these politicians have one-on-one private meetings with him? I mean, that's the question that I just don't understand. I mean, to me, if you're a politician in the city and you're in elected office, why are you having a one-on-one personal meeting with this individual?
I mean, that's not a question for me to necessarily answer. I don't know the motivations of individuals. I mean, my personal theory is I think any politician, I mean, they want to do good for the city. I think they look at a developer and they look at someone who's promising resources and capital to the city. And I mean, they should at least entertain the idea of meeting with them, whether or not you meet with them a second time or third time, or once you do your research, that's where it becomes a little problematic, but that's what I would theorize. I mean, why not? If someone's making promises, at least hear them out. But, once you smell something fishy, you probably should back out.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think here's my difference. If you're Jack Young or if you're a city council member and your job and your role is to develop Baltimore, and this guy's coming in with this idea and promise of money to develop Baltimore, then sure, okay. But why would a state's attorney meet with that? That's what I didn't know. Like, a state's attorney has no role whatsoever in the development of Baltimore. So what that meeting would be about is God knows and beyond my recollection. I didn't get that one.
I didn't get that one either.
Well, I don't get it either. I mean, it goes to show how much. I mean, the buzz that was around him. I mean, I can't speak to the motivations of Marilyn Mosby in that example of the state's attorney meeting with him. But, maybe people were just trying to meet with a potential fundraising individual person who could donate to their next campaign. Who knows?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I couldn't see what that conversation
I
would
couldn't
be.
see that. I guess I was even more disturbed when I saw the case of Jarrell Bratcher and how this is a case that should never have been prosecuted. And, my understanding is the young prosecutor told Mr. Bratcher's attorney that he was told by the front office that he had to proceed. And so those are the types of meetings that I'm concerned about. But I believe we have some callers on the line.
All right.
We have Christopher Irving on the line. Hold on a second here. Christopher, you there, sir?
Yep.
All right.
Hey,
you're on with Richard.
Oh, how's it going, everybody?
Good. How you feeling?
Hey.
So recently, Kahan.
Oh God.
Freudian slip. So I was in a political conversation with a small group of friends the other night, and the name came up, and I just happened to. My thoughts just flowed straight to Facebook, and I posted the name Kahan Dhillon is tantamount to a Seinfeld reference at this point. And that conversation went from about 7 p.m. until almost 7 o'clock the next evening. I don't know what is going on. It just begged the question. I remember when a lot of this was happening because I was contacted by Brittany as well. And I was just
Everybody
when I
was.
was told, oh, he would like to meet with you. He's going around speaking to these kind of people or whatever. And I just kept saying, why? And then when I looked him up, I didn't find anything either. So the next time they followed up, I was like, no, thanks. I'm good. So when you talk about elected officials meeting with someone, I get the notion of meeting with someone, but elected people don't just meet with someone because they have an idea. There's usually a lot more to be going on in there. Usually somebody's going to check out something, or he presents something establishing who he is or who he was or whatever. Ivan, just like you said, there should be some record of his service if he was on Capitol Hill. If everybody who comes along gets that type of audience, not much actual work would get done. So I'm still wondering. I mean, this is almost like I don't know. They make movies about this kind of stuff. Like, who is this guy? There's a lot of supposition around who he is, and for the noise that he was able to make in a metropolitan city, for nobody to actually be able to verify almost anything about him.
Yeah.
That in and of itself just sets up all kinds of bells, whistles, and fat ladies singing.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's interesting because I remember Brittany called and emailed me twice last year around this time period. Wanted to meet me 2-3 times, and I looked. I did what most people do. You want to meet me, talk to me. Let me try to Google you, see who you are. You're this developer, say it's $10 billion. I couldn't find anything. So then I said, well, I don't want to be mean. Then I looked and said, well, they don't even live in Baltimore City. Mm-hmm. So I don't really understand why you want to meet with me. I'm running for state's attorney. I'm not a developer, Let me focus on the people. And so I never met with Kahan, never met with Brittany. They sent me numerous emails talking about, we got to set up another meeting. So I just kind of feel like, I think it's kind of almost an insult because you have people in Baltimore City who are really doing good things, and they can't get meetings with some of these elected officials. And here comes this guy from out of town who nobody knows about, but people are lining up to meet him who are elected officials. I get it. The city council, fine. The president of the city council, fine. Some of the other elected officials, I just feel like you got to at least go on the internet and Google and to sit down and say, at least let me find something out about you. Mm. But I mean, look, I've never been a city council president, so I don't know, But I guess the other part, I think the city council president, didn't you say, sir, that he took a ride along with Mr. Dhillon and pointed out areas that he wanted to purchase and invest in the city?
He did.
Well, wouldn't you at least sit down and say, well, what type of money are you really working with? Like, do I need to show you the $100,000 parcels, or can I just go ahead and show you the $10 billion parcel?
Or where your money's coming from?
They ask that about everybody else, so why aren't you going to ask him?
Let me tell you something. I've known Jack Young since he was yay big on the city council. I ain't never had a ride along with Jack. I can't get for 10 minutes with Jack. Maybe I ain't got a $10 billion question.
Every time we reach out to Jack, we always get his Lester Davis.
Yeah. That's my main man. That's my main. Don't talk about Lester.
No, I ain't going to talk about him. I'm just saying we always get Lester. We don't get the man. You know what I mean?
So I think what's not being touched on that should be touched on is in the shadows of what happened with former Senator Nat Oaks. Mm-hmm. These questions have to be scrutinized. Yeah. These questions have to be asked, and they should be pursued.
Absolutely.
This is not to imply anything, but they should be pursued. I mean, it's like we're talking around a very big elephant that just had a very big dinner inside a small house.
Yeah,
and took a poop.
So, Mr. Yeagley,
coming next.
you were Mr. Yeagley. You were there, and I know you were following this. Did you ever find any sort of possible threat or connection with Kahan and the entire investigation revolving around Senator Oaks?
Well, when it was brought to me, it was mostly just coincidental, and it was people speculating on the behalf. There were the court documents that described certain things, and it very much kind of aligned with the behavior that he had. Now, obviously, that's just behavior, and that could be, as I said, coincidental. The timing of everything was very suspicious, of course. He made himself very public with PBR as like an actual strategy once the Nathaniel Oakes indictment was handed down, which would lead one to believe that the state's case was done, or at least done within this sphere of whatever they were trying to do. But from there, I did find out that Kahan so that was 2017. I did find that Kahan was in the city lurking, but was not promoting himself in 2016. So we all know how hungry he is for press and how hungry he is to put his name out there. But in 2016, he wasn't doing such a thing. And that was also the time when he was going on ride-alongs with Nathaniel Oakes and with Jack Young. But when you look at the Nathaniel Oakes later on during the process of me filming with him and recording with him, more court documents were leaked, and it said that, this informant was doing the exact same thing with Nathaniel Oakes. It was the same pattern. So once again, that could still be coincidental, but, out-of-town developer, no track record, very much a black box, appears in 2016, talking about corruption and taking these private meetings with all these politicians and asking people about the 10 most influential people so they can get connected to other people. There's a lot of coincidental things that kind of tie it to that seems about right, but who knows?
Right. So this was a big question too, because we did some research on his father. Now his father, and I'm sure you come across this, was very big in the Sikh world order. Banned from India, being on a terrorist list over there, but was really big in D.C. for some reason. Came over to America, kind of got acclimated with the D.C. politics. I guess I wouldn't say it's the same as how his son tried to do in Baltimore, because I don't know how. But did you, during your investigation, during your time following, did you ever come across any family members of Kahan or anybody closely associated with him or his father?
I was not able to talk to any family members. I was able to talk to a former neighbor of his who actually kind of just gave a pretty poor interview in the sense of I felt like it was very scripted. But yeah, I couldn't get a hold of any friends, family. Kahan regulated that. Even when I was in his inner circle, he regulated that. But then once I kind of separated myself to the contact people, they clearly had been given the heads up of don't talk to this guy. So no, I did not talk to them. I heard he had a bit of a falling out with his sister at one point in time, so I thought I could speak with her. That didn't even happen. So no. But to the point you were making actually about his dad, I mean, in a lot of ways it seems one of the journalists that I was working with appears, I think, in the third episode, Michael Amft, who I mentioned earlier. He was talking about his dad using his money to kind of influence policy and kind of just spread money around in the political world. That very much, I don't know to what degree his father was doing that. It was, just one person's comment, but it does seem like that was inherited where, he just enjoys being in this kind of political sphere, just kind of doing whatever he can to try to pretend as if he has power. So that might have been a genetic thing passed down to him in a weird way.
Right. And I think that's probably where he learned that behavior. His father had money and a lot of influence. Yeah. Now, one of his family members is the vice chair of the biggest organization in Canada under the Sikh movement. So, they took that movement from India, went to Pakistan, grew it, came over to America. Now it's trying to take over in Canada. And his family seems to be intricately involved in this from the father, who seemed to have had money. And I mean, you can see YouTube videos of this guy and everything online. They worshipped this guy like he was a very big leader. Now, Kahan was never really mentioned other than in some little articles of, passed down articles about him going over to get married or whatever. So it seems to seem that his father had the influence and the money and let me get with the politicians. And Kahan may have seen this at a younger age and felt like, okay, I'm going to emulate what my father did, but doesn't seem to have the same resources or the influence. Just my opinion, and that his father may have had.
I think some of the things that we talked about too, Hassan, was that the Sikh world order at one point was very active, and in some cases was considered to be a terrorist organization. And they changed after the late 80s. They changed their their movement to a more political and more economic movement. And that's what you see going on now in Canada. That's what you see going on around the country, how the Sikhs are assimilating into government, politics. And that's why me and you had questioned, was that Kahan's kind of underlying motive? Is he really looking to come in and establish the Sikh world order here in this city, and where Baltimore City may be very easy pickings because of, economically we're distressed, and the Sikhs tend to have a lot of collected money and collected power together.
Yeah, that would be an interesting take. I would love that. Yeah.
Hey, is Mark on the phone?
Yeah, Mark. Hey, Christopher, you have anything else for us?
Actually, I was going to also just add, I don't think we should completely rule out a degree of mental health issue. Because it's either there's either ill intent, ill or salacious intent, and absent that, then you have to look at, okay, if he wasn't trying to do something underhanded, is the guy just ill?
Yeah, something.
Or narcissism, suffering.
It has to add some. There has to be an end to that. What was the goal? What was the objective?
That's a really good question. All right, thanks for calling in, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, you guys.
I don't know. Every time you ask more questions, it brings up more questions on Kahan. Like
it does.
Big bro.
Hey, Wellity.
Hey, what's up?
Oh, Lord.
Richard, thank you so much for this has been so informative. And as you know, we must have talked 6 months ago. I've been like a dog with a bone on this Kahan Dhillon story. So I've been right there with you on trying to bring it up to the forefront. So congratulations on getting some much overdue attention on it. Just a little bit of context and why I tend to believe the stories that he at least has some affiliation with the FBI at some point, if not now. And that is that, especially now that Richard talks about, he was in Baltimore, doing work in Baltimore for a while, very quietly before anyone knew anything about him, and then he appeared. That screams FBI to me. And every time you guys say black box, that screams FBI to me. The other thing I will say is that, and I can't, attribute it to specific council people, but my phone, after our show with Kahan ran, my phone rang off the hook with Baltimore City Council members calling me, and to a person, they all unanimously said that basically Kahan was in their lives because of Jack Young. That Jack set up the hearing of the housing committee that John Bullock chaired. That the meetings that they were taking were at the behest of Jack. That Jack was his ambassador for whatever reason to the Baltimore City Council. So when you raise a question about why would a council member meet with some weird guy in a turban that doesn't have any official indicia of being able to do big deals, well, they would. If the council president was their ambassador, their entree, they'd all meet with someone that Jack told them that they should,
Right. And Richard, you said that during the podcast, right?
Well, yeah, I was forwarded an email of Jack Young sending it to every back in 2016, sending it to every, I guess beginning of 2017, but sending it to every incoming city council member. It was 14 people. It was the incoming and the current. All of them.
Yeah,
saying, hey, here's Kahan Dhillon, meet him.
Yep, the audience before the housing committee, where you played the audio of Yitzi and Eric and them going after him. That hearing was held at the behest, it's my understanding. And just to be clear, I'm not saying who it is, but I am saying who it's not. I did not get this from John Bullock. We've never discussed it. But my understanding is that hearing was held not at the behest of the chairman of that committee, who is John Bullock, but at the behest of the council president.
Oh, okay. Wow. So I guess all roads appear to lead toward the council president.
Mm-hmm. And as we all know, that if you follow the logical trail with the, and I have no independent knowledge about whether it's true or not, but as you all, I'm not saying anything that all of you don't already know. People think that the person that that Nat Oaks was tipping off was Jack Young. That's that I don't think I'm saying anything out of school or something, and I'm not saying I don't know whether it's true or not, but I think we can all acknowledge that that's been the general feeling, is that this other person that was also a target that was tipped off was Jack. And if that's true, then that makes sense that Kahan was at some point involved in a covert law enforcement capacity. It all really, like Richard said, there's no smoking gun, but there are a whole lot of coincidences, and I don't believe in coincidences.
And Jack and anybody who knows in politics, or at least knows that connection, even though Nat's from West Baltimore and Jack's the East Baltimore guy, they were very close. Very close. Yeah. And still are to this day. And again, it's still rumored that part of maybe that plea deal was that Jack would not run for city council president. That to me doesn't make sense, though, because the feds, if they got you, they ain't going to say, all right, don't run and just go ahead and retire. We ain't going to do nothing. That don't make too much sense to me.
This is what I'll say. I'm a little shocked by a number of things that I've seen recently on the federal side in reference to the Gun Trades Task Force. The Baltimore Sun and Justin Finn had written an article about this one particular federal officer who resigned. And I was expecting, okay, this officer's resigned because they caught him lying. Are they going to charge him? So I don't know what's going on with that, But
he resigned immediately. See,
he resigned immediately, and
that I can see if Jack resigned back then, that would make sense. But just wait out your term and then resign. Yeah. That's a little too convenient.
No, they don't do that.
No.
They don't cut them
right about
that.
We'll
leave you alone, but we'll let you finish.
Right, that would mean they would have to have a compassionate heart, which I don't think
they definitely don't, especially for Jack. So, Richard, we're about to wrap it up. I want to thank you for coming on, but
you got a call. Sorry,
but make sure before you go, give the information out to the family how they can either get in contact with you on social media or how they can directly hear Town of the Big House online.
So they can hear Town of the Big House on Apple Podcasts, so it's iTunes. You can, if you have a Apple phone, Google Play. You can go to wypr.com/podcast central and listen straight from their site. But if you just have a podcast player, you can listen on any podcast player you have. So it's pretty accessible at this point in time.
How's it doing? Are a lot of people listening?
Surprisingly, a surprising amount have listened, yes.
Wow. Okay.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is.
We'll keep pushing it out there. And we appreciate you taking the time to come on to the show today to discuss this important podcast.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.
We have Lisa Mill on the line. Mark, stay with us. Stay with us real quick.
Okay.
Lisa.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Ivan Bates. I know y'all talking about Kahan Dhillon, but that is not my major interest right now.
Ho, Lisa.
To say is
Ivan,
special shout out to Bates and Garcia. Yeah.
Ivan Bates ain't the only damn person on this show, damn it.
No, he's not. And hello, Hassan. I love you too. Still waiting on that phone call. But what I wanted to say is a special shout out to Ivan Bates of Bates and Garcia. They made such a major difference in my life, and I just wanted to say thank you. Best law firm in the city.
Thank you very much.
Miss Lisa, what are me and Jason? Chopped liver?
Well, see, y'all don't have a law firm, and what the Bates and Garcia law firm has done for my family today has got me like walking on cloud nine.
She's a very, very happy individual. Thank you so much for entrusting us and your family with the issue. And we were glad we could be there for you.
Happy client.
Thank you, Ivan. Bye-bye, Hassan. Bye-bye, Jason. Bye, everyone.
When am I going to see you back down at the casino? I'm going to call you tomorrow about that, what we talked about.
Okay, all right.
I got that ready for you. Then I'll see you down Horseshoe sometime when I get enough money to get back down there. They've been breaking me lately. Kids, holidays, everything else. I went down to Live, though. I haven't been to Live. So I went to Live. I said, Horseshoe ain't giving me nothing. There ain't no Horseshoe but my butt going down there. I always lose going to Horseshoe. Went to Live, won a couple $1,000. I said, boy, I'm going back to Live. Y'all got me. Going back on a roulette table. Make it happen. I'm going down there with Keisha, Jason's wife.
Yeah, take her.
her, me, and Lisa. We're going to take a field trip to the casinos. We're going to do a live show from all the casinos in Maryland. That's what we're going to do.
Well, I'll tell you one person.
They cough up some money for advertising.
I won't have to, I can't go with y'all. Because I got a little 2-year-olds in my pockets, 2.5-year-olds in my pockets.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, it feels so good when you win.
Yeah,
but it hurts so bad when you smile. You be like, man, did I just spend $1,800 for nothing? Oh man, that hurts.
You had a good time.
Yeah, you had a damn good time. But I'm telling you, you get so caught up in it, you ain't worried about no food. You be in there for. I'm telling you, me and my brother, old man, right? You know, old man. We be in, especially him. He went in there one night, stayed for 2 days straight, and then come out the goddamn casino.
Good God.
Came out of there with $18,000 though.
Oh.
But you don't leave, huh?
Don't get me wrong. I love the casinos and I love to gamble, but if I'm going to go in and gamble somewhere, I don't want to come out and be in shit-stained Anne Arundel County or Russell Street. I'm going to Vegas or somewhere. I mean,
MGM Graham in Prince George's County.
Yeah, now that I could do. But, I mean, you going to gamble all day and come out, you at the Royal Farms? Oh, hell no.
No, but I got to give Live credit. They got the hotel, and they don't mind putting you up in that hotel neither. For free.
Cheaply.
No, they put me. They was like, man, you want a room? We give you one for free. No, you ain't getting me sucking up in here.
My wife got the gold card. No. My wife got the gold card. She only get a discounted rate.
Yeah, once they get going. But once they start seeing you winning, they want their money back.
They want to keep you in there. They want their money back. Yep.
So they like, yo, once they started seeing me with these, because you got black chips is the hundreds. I was getting 500 chips. They started seeing them going out. They was like, bro, you want to stay for the night?
You want a room?
Hotel. See, Horseshoe don't have that. That's their problem. Horseshoe's going to go out of business in the next 2 to 3 years. Watch what I tell you.
Now, I think they're going to eventually buy some land or do something down there and build a hotel. They got
Let me tell you something. I go in Horseshoe now, it'd be like 7 people in there. Horseshoe used to be top and bottom, all tables filled, jumping, especially on weekends and all that. Soon as they built MGM up Prince George's, that killed all their business. Yeah. And they ain't kicking out no money because it's when you hitting jackpots and machines like Lisa and them do the slot machines. That's too slow for me. No, I can't sit there all day on no damn penny machines.
That's Keisha.
All that stuff. I can't do it. I got to go $100 a roll on roulette. Yeah. Like, let's make this happen or get the hell up out of here. One of the two. But if you're not hitting, if there's not enough money in there, the machines it's off of a rotating thing.
Right.
So if there's not enough money coming, they're not going to never pay you out good.
Right.
So by them being so slow, they're not giving any. So people are starting to say, "The hell with that! I'm going to Live or I'll go out Prince George's, to make some money because there's people there." I'm telling you, they're going to close Horseshoe down, and that's going to be a loss for Baltimore because that money is still an economic engine to the surrounding communities and to the schools statewide. And I'm not a big proponent of gambling. I don't believe in it because of the addiction that it brings. I personally do it, and that's just me.
Right.
But I would never promote it to other people to do.
Right,
you know what I mean? But I love it. That's my second addiction. I got over one addiction to go to that addiction. But nonetheless, I think it's been a good benefit to the state. I think we need to legalize marijuana now, and we really want to get some money. Man, let me make it happen.
They got to stop them fights down there at Horseshoe. They get a little.
Well, these idiots rob people in the garage. They got cameras.
Yeah.
They sit right, these little kids. They watching people walk out and try to rob them in the parking lot. And it's a camera sitting right there. Police catch them right when they walk out the goddamn, right around Royal Farms, like Mark said. Royal Farms right across the street. You don't get past Royal Farms. Get your little ass over here. Put handcuffs on them, you idiot.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got to go. We way past the time. Oh, we ain't even past the time, are we?
No, we're on time.
Are we on time?
Okay.
Mark, you got anything for us?
No. This was a good show, too.
Let me tell you something, man. You got 48 hours to bring your ass in this studio. Well, you about to get fired, bro. I thought it's been 10 minutes since I've been here. I ain't seen you in this studio in weeks.
I was there Friday. You weren't. See?
The only time you come is when I'm not here. That's all right. At least we got dual people when I ain't
full
here.
coverage, you know.
Susan Frazier says, Hassan, can you give some of that money to help Richard finish the podcast?
Hell to the no. I can give DMV Daily some of the money to finish our podcast, but I ain't giving nobody no money.
Yeah. I like the idea of the GoFundMe to help Richard finish the podcast.
Yeah.
Someone really should start that and send that around.
But
And,
what's the
you
finish
know,
though? That the question is though.
I think there are more
What do you-
people.
I think
the
there's more rocks to
untold
turn over.
stories,
Yeah.
The untold stories. I think now people are like, you know what? Okay, I wasn't the only one that was duped. I want to tell my story too.
Yeah.
And I think he'll be able to tell more stories.
But I also think there's going to be a lot of people who, because they see the popularity in it now, they just want to put their name out
Yep,
there,
they gonna
right?
jump on it.
So they just want to jump on and even act like they knew, even if they had no connection or limited connection to Kahan. But, oh, that was my best friend. And you know what he did?
I was on the inside.
Yeah. And that's where you kind of, you know, in that kind of, in media and that kind of stuff, people will do a lot of stuff to get on TV in that little 15 seconds of fame. Believe me.
One of the things that's interesting to me, I just wanted to see one of the non-disclosure agreements.
I got one.
Read it. You do?
Yeah.
I want to read that. I just
send it
want to
over to
read
you.
that. Because, you know, one of the things that blew me away during the campaign, there was somebody that was in the state's attorney's race who wasn't the current state's attorney, wasn't myself, but had all these non-disclosure agreements. I couldn't believe that.
So, can you?
But I ain't gonna
help
say
me
no
with
names.
something? Can you help me with something
I
on
will.
that council? Why?
Thyru. Why what?
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, talking to the phone, Mark.
Oh, sorry. A question for the legal counsel. I was always taught in my pre-law days that, a contract comes with some consideration. What are people signing NDAs for if they're volunteers and they ain't getting paid? What the hell do I get in return for signing an NDA?
You
I
know
hang
what?
around with
Right.
you? I mean,
Exactly. And that's what gets me. Like these NDA non-disclosure agreements. Come on now. You running
who the hell
for
would
you
sign
running for
an
public.
NDA and they're working for free?
You know what? A lot of people, a lot of these young college students and law students didn't know any better. And it's obvious with Kahan, a number of people just didn't know any better. And so they signed it. And that's a bully tactic. And that's one of the things that really bothered me with Kahan. It seemed to be a bullying tactic to say, hey, I'm going to let you in my world, but how dare you give any information about me to anybody? Because if you do, I got you.
Half the people that sign NDAs can talk all they want because they're judgment proof. You know what I mean? I think they got nothing to take.
Yeah.
God, they coming after you.
And these NDAs were only specific to information regarding the Renaissance Project, right? So at least the one that I saw, right? He may have had ones with individuals that said you can't talk about me at all, but the ones that I saw that I know of were about the Renaissance Project itself, that no information can be disclosed in regards to that. So they could talk about him all day long.
Yeah, and that's different. I
and that's
understand
in
that.
exchange for what, though? Why am
Exactly.
I signing this?
Because
I
so
understand. You got to hand me a check when you hand me an NDA.
right,
Or
and
I'm working for
he
you
made
or
these
something.
big promises. Because I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna be honest with you. He was like, "Oh man, I'm thinking about running for mayor," and people tell me you know how to run campaigns. So when it's time, I would like you to consider to run, my mayor. Now, mind you, I laughed at the guy. I mean, it's okay. I consider it. I'm in business, so I'm gonna do business is business. But I'm looking at it like, bruh, okay. But then it was like, well, okay, you can be a field organizer with the Baltimore Renaissance. And then he had these other people who I knew who were his district organizers. And I used to ask them, what is he paying y'all? Oh, it's nothing. There's no pay. Nigga, are you crazy?
Can you
Are you
imagine?
nuts?
Wow.
Ah, come on, man. Cut it out, man.
Yeah.
And these people ain't no scrubs. Ain't like they needed it, right? They have jobs and other stuff to do. It's like, why even put yourself in that situation? Some people just spread themselves too thin, even when money's involved. But when there ain't no money involved, the hell with that. I ain't sitting down with you. Ain't money involved right now.
Exactly.
Money on the table, baby. We put too much work in here. We gotta go grab the bag. So if y'all gonna start a GoFundMe, God damn it, start it for DMV. we got bills.
We actually have one.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I'm posting it up right now.
You got a couple thousand for the casino. That could be the first big gift.
The seed money, Mark. The seed money.
Oh, you trust and believe. It's gifted every month when I got to pay the bills. Because guess what? It's got to get paid somehow. But, we love it. We love what we do. So we appreciate everything, the support for watching. Make sure y'all keep watching. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to continue with the election coverage. We got council candidate from the 14th Councilmatic District coming on to the program tomorrow. Stay tuned to find out who it is. Might not be who you think it is. Make sure you tune in. 5 o'clock tomorrow, right here, DMV Daily.
Mark's going to make sure he's here tomorrow.
Remember, new promise begins with a new day. Therefore, the promise of tomorrow and that guest at 5 o'clock is greater than that of yesterday.
Free Keith Davis.